Hey, it's Robert Clickybeard, the host of the Commercial Landscaper podcast. For the next 30 minutes, I'm inviting you to high-impact conversation with some of the most accomplished leaders and entrepreneurs in our space. This isn't fluff. It's real, battle-tested insight rooted into my book, The Ironman Mindset for Entrepreneurs, that will challenge you to grow as a leader, stretch yourself beyond your comfort zone, and scale your business the smart way. Our audience has now doubled, and I'm hearing every week how these episodes are helping business owners sharpen their edge, increase profitability, and raise the bar across the industry. So here's my ask. If this episode sparks something for you, please share it with either a teammate, fellow business owner, or a friend that needs that extra push. We're building something bigger here, and I want you to be part of it. Big news. Our digital courses are now live at wilson360.com. These are built for ambitious leaders like you, alongside training classes designed to build your team, along with the tools they need to win. I'm also thrilled to welcome our new sponsor, Bomb Data. They're transforming how commercial landscapers manage labor with intuitive analysis and help you control costs and boost margins. Check them out, and if you're ready to make data your competitive advantage. Thanks for listening, and let's keep pushing things forward.
Urtur is a lifestyle brand born from grit, founded by Zach Strauser. Their mission is clear: to raise $1 million for the trades by supporting vocational training across North America. Urtur makes tough, smart gear built for landscaping and snow pros who work hard outside every day in all conditions. Their apparel puts safety first, helps crews look sharp, and honors the pride in their craft. Every purchase has purpose, fueling training programs and building a resilient workforce. Urtur isn't just workwear, it's a culture of respect, resilience, and results.
Hi, this is Robert Clickybeard with the Commercial Landscaper podcast. Really excited to be joined by Dan Grange. Dan, welcome to the call today.
Thanks, Robert. Good to see you.
So Dan, tell the audience just a little bit about your background in the landscape industry. We have listeners from all over the place, and they'd obviously love to know, who is Dan?
Well, I'll start at the beginning. My first real experience with landscaping was during summers in high school. I worked for two retired teachers. It was called the Teacher's Landscape, really nice older gentlemen, and that was kind of my intro to the industry. I didn't at the time think that it could be a career. I thought it was just something that was good for a summer job. And when I went to college, I didn't exactly know what I wanted to study, and ended up finding a program called landscape management. Just felt like home to me. Loved everything about it. I liked the design. I liked the science. I liked the problem solving. And so ended up leaving college, went to Connecticut to work for 3 years with a residential design build firm. I was a crew leader, really, really good experience there. My Spanish improved drastically during those 3 years, and learned a lot there. And then eventually wanted to come back to Colorado, where I'm from, and spent the last 16 years working for a big commercial company, or not 16 years, sorry, 13 years working for a big commercial company, and had all kinds of roles there. So I did estimating, I did project management, ran some jobs, I did safety, and then a really big piece of what I did there was hiring, training, recruiting. So that was a big focus there as well.
So you obviously got tremendous experience, and I know you've joined Wilson 360 as one of our experts in construction and training and onboarding. So we're obviously happy to have you here. But I'd love you just to sort of talk through, maybe just some of the challenges you've seen in, I suppose, especially in the construction side. The retaining employees, keeping them engaged, because you spend a lot of time trying to get people in. That's the biggest complaint from companies, is how do I get really good employees in and bring them in, and then maybe they leave after 3 months, 6 months. You've obviously I think you've created some success factors.
Yeah, it's absolutely a challenge. And you say people are sad when they lose them after 3 to 6 months, and sometimes you lose them after 3 to 6 days, or in some case, that many hours. I hired a guy once. He went out to work, didn't show up the next day, and I called him. He called me about 1 p.m. and he said, I just can't, my body can't deal with this. I'm so sorry. I just can't do it. So there's a lot of challenges there. I think on the construction side, one of the things that tends to be more challenging than sometimes on the maintenance side is when you have people direct report to a job site. And so I know that was the case at one of the companies I worked at, where those crews didn't come into the office. or into the shop. So you didn't see them. So there was just fewer touch points and fewer times to even if you didn't talk to them, to look at them and see their body language or whatever it might be. So that was a big challenge with construction, is just how do you maintain that connection with new hires or anybody else in your field teams? That's a real challenge. And then I think on top of that, sometimes the mentality that your field leaders have, whether that's a superintendent or whether that's a foreman, they're not always the most welcoming bunch. And they tend to be a little blunt in their communication. And that can be really hard when you're bringing in new people without experience to the industry.
Never experienced that in my life, Dan. No, I think you're right. We, even taking the construction piece aside, we had a lot of maintenance crews that reported direct to, some large HOAs and some on-site jobs, and it was tough. You almost had to work harder on, maintaining that culture piece and that camaraderie between employees, and because people were working remote, so I could definitely see that. I'm really interested in how you handled, I'm trying to think of the best way, that maybe that abrasiveness. I always remember, we had a lot of company parties, and you could really see that clear division between maintenance crews hanging out together, construction crews hanging out together, tree crews hanging out together, just because they had that almost like a slightly different mindset and mentality or demeanor. Talk through maybe some of your successes with the construction foreman and what you saw. Maybe you tried different experiments on how to work with them better and better deliverables.
One of the things that worked really well for us was we realized that we had a problem with some of our foremen, that they had really high standards for the new people who were coming in and were running a lot of people off, frankly. And so one of the things we realized is that a lot of our foremen, they came up through the field. A lot of them didn't have a lot of schooling or training in basic workplace type things. And so what we decided to do was to bring them in, about 6, 8, 10 of them at a time. We'd bring them in and we would do leadership type trainings with them. So one of the big ones that we did was on trust. And so we brought them all in because we thought that if we could help our foremen to understand how to develop trust with their teams, that would lead to better performance and better retention. So we brought them in. I tried to have a little hands-on activity. A lot of our foremen tended to be really kind of hands-on and tactile guys. So we did a dumb little activity where I would have them tie a knot. Right. I taught them how to tie a bowline knot. And then I had a big sledgehammer head, with the hole through it, no handle on it. So I'd have them tie a bowline and I'd say, okay, who trusts this guy who tied the knot? And then I would set it up where I'd have it on the rope. And I'd say, give me your phone. I'm going to put it underneath this. So do you really trust him? It was a really dumb activity, but it got some engagement and got them working with their hands a little bit to start. And it led to a good discussion about, why are your guys going to trust you? And how can you learn how to trust them? And if they mess up on an assignment or on a task that you ask them to do, how can you move past that? So we worked a lot on trust. And then the other training that we did that I thought was really impactful was basically just talking about respect. I had some really good dialogue with that. And one of the examples that I found that worked really well for our crews, and most of our foremen come from Mexico. And I noticed when they come into the foremen's meetings, not these meetings, but our bigger meetings, they would come in and they would go around the room and everybody would shake hands. It was just kind of a customary thing. So we talked about that and how it can be seen as rude if you're not coming in and doing that. And we said, it doesn't actually mean you're rude if you don't come in and do that, but we can read things a certain way. And it's the same with our new hires, right? We may have a new hire come in who's from a different country or speaks a different language. And how do we try and show them as much respect as possible so that we're not running people off?
When you talked about trust, there's a real great book that I immediately thought about. Did you use any type of programming or sort of some type of a source to, just talk about that leadership techniques? Anything that sprung to mind, or was it just your ongoing training over the years?
I did some research on trust. There was one guy, and I remember his last name is Horsager. I think it's David Horsager, but he's supposedly an expert on trust. Really good. I liked a lot of his things. But I found a lot of different people who had talked about trust. Maybe I paraphrased things a little bit too much. But what I came to the realization is that most of the people who talk about it, when you're talking about trust, you're really kind of talking about three different things, right? you trust people who are competent and know what they're talking about or know what they're doing. You trust people who care about you when you know they're invested in you. And you can trust people when you know who they are. And so that's what we talked about a lot is you've got to make sure people know that you care about them and are invested in their success. You've got to make sure that you're competent and you're telling them things that are going to help them do better. And you need someone who's letting out a little bit of who they are so that they can trust you, so that it doesn't feel fake, so that it doesn't feel like an act. But several different sources, nothing terribly deep. And I don't think it needed to be, but I think it was more a way to start that discussion and get people talking about something other than just putting pipe in the ground and planting trees.
Yeah, and I love that idea because I've done a fair bit of leadership development and talking about trust there, but sort of to do it on that that field level must be really interesting. We actually had David Horsager, one of our Wilson 360 events back in the day. It was a university we held, and he came in. I think actually a couple of times he came in, and yeah, you're right, he was an unbelievable speaker. The other book that pops in my head is Patrick Lencioni, Five Dysfunctions of a Team. He has this pyramid diagram, and what everything is based on is the biggest piece of that pyramid, which is trust at the bottom. So to take that level and then dial it into doing some simple exercises and to build that trust on that crew level basis, I think it's tremendous.
It was a lot of fun doing it. And I think what was really satisfying to me was feeling like some concepts that these foremen had never really been exposed to in a real formal way like that, and bringing it to a level that was hopefully accessible to them and that they could take away from that. The other thing that I really liked about it, in those small groups, we didn't have their managers. Our foremen all report to superintendents, and we didn't have the superintendents in the room. So they felt very free to speak. And some of the things that they came out, I ended up, passing to their superintendents and saying, hey, here's some of what we're hearing from you. We're asking our foremen to be a little bit more mindful of the way that they treat their people. Here's a few things that potentially you all could do for your foreman to help them feel better about the company and their situation.
What were some of the, I suppose, immediate results that you saw from going through those group training sessions? And did you see productivity go up, retention of new employees improve? What were some of the things you saw?
I did not monitor production changes before and after. The main goal for me was to see retention go up. And we did see retention go to a much better level after that. The other thing, more on a qualitative level, that I loved was when we had a foreman who was struggling with a new employee, or maybe a long tenured employee, they would call me and say, I don't know what to do here. This guy, he's showed up late 3 days this week, or, I tell him to do something, and every time he's out of my sight, he pulls his phone out, or whatever it might be. They would call me about those things. And it gave me a really good opportunity to provide coaching to them. In a lot of cases, they were fairly simple fixes. And it also developed this relationship where they realized, I'm not trying to get you to hang on to somebody that I hired who's no good. What I'm asking for is, if the guy's on his phone too much, did you talk to him about it? Did you tell him that's not acceptable? Did you give him a chance to fix the behavior? And if he didn't fix it, did you follow through with him again? And so it's fairly basic stuff, but I was surprised, for as tough and maybe abrasive as some of those guys were, they were also really hesitant to do any sort of discipline or any sort of conversations. So that, I think, was the best result for me. What was most satisfying was seeing that when they struggled or when they were having problems with someone on their crew, they would call me. Sometimes they kind of wanted to just dump it on my lap. But in a lot of cases, I was able to coach him and say, hey, you can figure this out. Just tell him if he shows up late again, that's, he's on his last strike and he won't be working here anymore.
One of the things I would find dealing with my own employees was, we would do some training, do a great job of the training and bring in some practical stuff and cool exercises and make it fun. But, after, 18, 90, 100 days, they certainly seem to forget a lot of that training that had been done. So we would have to sort of go back through and do a similar training, maybe, probably 3, 4, 5 months after that initial training. What were some of the things you did to help sort of reinforce some of your ideas and techniques?
So I would do these trainings every week, but it would be a rotating group. And I think we were on roughly a 6 to 8 week rotation. So at the end of every session, and maybe this sounds too elementary school, but I would have them write something down on a piece of paper and say, write down 3 goals for next time. And then we're going to put them in envelopes. We're going to seal them. I'm not going to look at them. I may not even look at them next time, but we're going to look at these again the next time. And so I think that worked. It wasn't perfect, but it was something to know, hey, there's some level of accountability here. And it was a reminder at that next one where they said, oh, I was really going to do this and I totally spaced it. I'll work on that this week or next week. So that was one method that I tried, and I believe that to be effective. The other thing that was really good was after we had run all of the groups of foremen through a training, we would then do that just with the superintendents. So then as the superintendents were out in the field, they would be able to help reinforce some of those things that we had talked about. And then we would also try and do reminders. We would do monthly foremen's meetings, as a whole group. I would always ask for 5-10 minutes to talk about one of those topics as a reminder. But I wish I had a silver bullet for that one. That's a really tough thing, trying to get people to retain that. But I think that was the biggest thing. And I was very fortunate that our branch leadership was very supportive of me. So it wasn't something where I had these guys in a room talking to them, and then as soon as they left the building, people were saying, forget about that. You don't need to worry about it. The leadership was very supportive too.
One of the soapboxes I get on every so often is not fully understanding who the employees are in terms of either, hidden talents or hidden potential there. And it's only once we do some smaller group training, one-on-one training, or given opportunities or problems to solve that, we shine a light on some of those opportunities or potential future rock stars. Did you uncover anything like that as you went through your different sort of training and saw anybody sort of excel and embrace what you were trying to teach them?
Yes. I think it was just a different enough environment that you saw different sides to some of the people attending those sessions. You saw the people who were a little bit more collaborative. You would see people who, when they felt like someone else in the group wasn't understanding something, they would stop and say, no, I think this is right, or I think this is wrong because of this. And here's an example. So you got to see a lot more of the leadership side in those rooms, which was really, really informative for me. I tended to be somewhat involved in a lot of the discussions when we were talking about, who's ready to move up to the next level, or who's this, or we need someone to help with this situation. And being there in that kind of environment did help me to see that. But you're totally right about that. It's so hard sometimes to see those people and their talents when you just have them doing the same thing every day.
And if they're reporting direct to job sites.
Right, exactly.
So, if we're getting close to finishing up here, but, if you were to provide some advice to, some up and coming companies, growing companies, maybe even newer owners, what would be maybe a couple of key takeaways you would suggest to them and being able to, help with that onboarding, help with that retention, and just really investing in your workforce?
That's a great question. One, I think, key thing to remember is to think about how you communicate your expectations to a brand new hire. And the example that I always think of is at one point, so at the company I used to work for, we would give out shirts to every new hire. And I remember there was a point where they said, we're spending too much money on shirts for new hires. When they're leaving quickly, it's just we're wasting money on that. So instead of giving them 5 shirts, let's give them 3. I certainly understand the logic behind it, but I think I pushed back really hard against that, and we ended up continuing just to give everybody 5 shirts. And my reasoning was, if you give them 3 shirts, you're communicating from the very start that you have doubt that they're going to make it. A takeaway there is, what are you communicating on day one? And I wish I would have thought about it. It's such a good question, Robert, but I think it's really important, the message that we send from the very beginning to new hires. The other piece that I'll say is, especially if you have a bigger workforce, and especially if you don't see them every day, if they are direct reporting, all of those little things like getting them a new vest, handing out safety glasses, getting them new gloves, all of those things take on a much higher significance when that's one of the only touch points that you have with them. There was guys that I wouldn't see in the office for, maybe a year or 6 months. And so the only time they really have contact from what they consider the office is when they get a nice bright new vest or when they get new shirts. So I think that's a big thing for me is those little things mean a lot to our field workforces. The other thing that I think is really important to remember, if you're running a company and you feel confident about your culture, about your processes, about your values, whatever it is, when you feel really strongly about that, that's a great thing and you should be proud of that. But I think it's also important to remember that that means you have to invest so much more in getting a new hire ingrained in that. If you have a lot of processes that work great for you, that's something to be proud of. But that new hire, it's going to take them a long time to get up to speed. And I think sometimes there's not enough of an emphasis on that.
I think that whole onboarding piece there needs to be a lot more investment there. People have a great experience and great first week, 2 weeks, even a month, 2 months. They're more likely they're going to share that experience with other potential prospects. I've seen many situations where perhaps an owner or supervisor has welcomed a person by maybe shaking their hands and then passing them off to an HR person or admin something, and it's not organized. And then they expect them to suddenly perform 100% on the job site. So it's just done badly in many, many different ways. And if you've made that effort to find those people, then invest that time into making them feel welcome. I've also seen situations where, we celebrate people leaving, like a leaving party. I'd rather spend that time and effort on welcoming the new people and even bringing in spouses if it's appropriate. But yeah, there's a lot more needs to be done in terms of explaining the culture, the values, expectations, making them feel special. That can be done in the front end for sure.
Absolutely. I did have one more thing come to mind.
Yeah.
If you have time for it. The other thing that I think is really important to put a real focus on your leaders that train and retain their people. At least in the places that I've worked, there's been a real focus on the crews who produce at a high level. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that. We tend to lack recognizing the foreman who maybe he's not the highest producer, but he's trained 4 other foremen and he's always got the next lead man ready to go. I think sometimes we don't value that properly. And I think that's a really key thing to remember as well.
Does that come in the way of some type of a public recognition, or have you seen some value in maybe some type of monetary bonus, attaboy type scenario where, they've been recognized, maybe even privately with all the extra work and training?
We never did anything from a monetary perspective. I think that would be a good way to do it. We would pay money if you said, hey, if you have someone from another company and they come in and work for us, especially if it's a foreman, we would give a great referral bonus for that. But we don't give kind of a training or a promotion bonus. I think that's a great idea. But a lot of times it was more just kind of the recognition to say, what I like to do is when we would have all of the foremen together for the monthly meetings would be to highlight and say, this foreman right here, he trained you and you and you and point around the room. And I think sometimes that's enough, just a sense of pride and being recognized in that kind of setting to say, in addition to the work I've put in the ground, I'm also being seen as someone who's building the company in other ways.
And that can even be extended by if that person trains somebody and those people have been promoted in the company, then that often leads to better lifestyle, and that then affects a wider audience, like their family as well. So I think the ripples go pretty far. Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. What's the best way for people to potentially reach out to you, pick your brain more, maybe even talk to you about some type of training or onboarding engagement?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm easy to find on there if you want to track me down there. I don't know. Is there any other ways you suggest, Robert, to
LinkedIn's always a good way. Sometimes I get nervous, people handing out emails and phone numbers, but LinkedIn is obviously a good way for you to be able to monitor that traffic. That's certainly one way. I think you're also listed on our website as well, so you can get in contact with you there as well. But it's been absolutely a pleasure talking to you today, and obviously you've got a lot of knowledge to share, so I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Robert. Good talking to you.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Cheers. That's a wrap for today's episode of the Commercial Landscaper podcast. I hope you're walking away with one powerful insight you can apply immediately, whether it's in your leadership function, your operations, or how you show up every day with that Ironman mindset. Remember, growth doesn't happen by accident. It happens through intentional moves, bold conversations, and surrounding yourself with the right voices. That's what this podcast is all about. If you found value today, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, share this episode with someone in your circle who's ready to raise their game. And don't forget, our Wilson 360 digital courses are now live and ready to go. So go to wilson360.com, explore the tools that are helping hundreds of contractors to level up across leadership, account management, and operations and more. And a huge shout out again to Bomb Data, our newest sponsor, helping landscapers make smarter decisions with real-time labor analytics. If you're serious about margins, they should be on your radar. Until next time, stay sharp, stay focused, and keep leading with purpose. Have a pure, dead, brilliant day. Cheers, everyone.